And so the invitation is to meet in the one heart, meet in the nowness, the ever-present now, this moment just as it is, where there is no past or future, there is only now. We slip out of time and space and into reality, into the remembering of what is real and true, where happiness is, where love is, and where freedom is. In this moment, just this moment, like this, before the story, before the thoughts that identify the I with someone. It is to be free in the I of God. Just the felt sense of being here. The way out of the maze is to watch it, is to be aware of the mind, be aware of the thoughts. Cannot find your way out of the maze by using thought, however clever you are, however smart, however much you have learned, however many techniques you had. Cannot find your way out of the maze. The only way out is to be bigger than it, is to come into the true perspective that is vaster, and from the zoomed out perspective to watch, to be aware, to see the thoughts that come and go, and to feel the felt sense of the presence of being that is independent and free of the story, free of past and future, free of the egocentric patterning, which is essentially protective. It is conditioned and learned. We cannot use thought to change that. It's a futile game. It is just to zoom out and come to a perspective clear and wide enough where you recognize who you are in truth, that you recognize that who you are in truth is already free, is the simple being, the silence, the stillness, this presence. Underneath the story, the moving, changing, there is a stillness, a silence that is ever present to itself. And it is in the recognition that the true essence nature is this ever-present awareness of being that knows only itself. Where there is no story, where there is no past and no future, there's just this moment as it is. There's not even really a present moment. There's just this here now, the nowness, the immediacy of true presence can never be captured as a present moment in the way that the mind might imagine it can, because the present has already really gone. As soon as it's thought about, it's already really past. So presence is this moment undone of thought, empty of thought. It's presence itself. There's a more profound intimacy in true presence. So when you can feel your true presence, there's an intimacy with yourself. just simply being here, being yourself. What is noticed as you come to feel the presence of being is a certain kind of expansion, or we could say a relaxation. Of course, what is true is not expanding or relaxing, but the sense of me, the holding pattern, the habit to identify with the mind and the body is relaxing into its true essence nature, is letting go. And so the invitation is to be here now, this moment, as the presence, to be here just like this and to not leave, to make a sincere commitment to yourself, to not leave yourself, whatever happens on the surface of life, to not leave yourself, to always know what is true, to always know the sanctuary of the self, of the silent being, to know that only here is truth, that you will never ever find truth in thoughts. You will never ever find truth in trying to understand the play, the Maya. You'll never ever be able to understand it because it is sticky and mystical, and it is not something that can be followed or understood. It dances around and morphs and shifts according to the filters that you are seeing it through. In truth, it is all God, it is all love. There is only one. And everything is conspiring for this truth to be known. But you have to know this truth inside you. You can never know this truth outside of you. And the opening to this remembering, because you already are this truth, the opening to this remembering is here now. It is when we slip out of the contraction of time and space and somebody and a story, and we fall into the presence of being, where the remembering of this truth is always here, always the same, always illumined in the knowing of itself, always one, only one, one with no other. So as we come to open to witness the thoughts, it is a way to open, to feel the independence of the witness. But do not allow the mind to create layers or levels or tiers of this unfolding. We make pointings as indicators that can allow a deeper settling into what is being noticed. But we are unfolding to this profundity of what we are, and we can slip all the way through, right? So it's not to have ideas about any kind of system or any kind of time frames or just any kind of ideas at all. Do not conceptualize anything that is spoken, because it is only alive in the moment, and it is pointing to a direct seeing in the moment. So we don't hold on to ideas and beliefs and conceptualize. We just receive the invitation in the moment, to be here now, be here in the presence of being, simply being. There is nothing to do, there is nothing to understand. It is to come to this remembering recognition, and to really drink in what this truth is. Now let's say in the earliest stages, it feels like you might be flip-flopping backwards and forwards, but we really do come to a depth where the being really starts to be recognized to be pervading all of your life, right? As we open to this truth, there's a knowing of it, but then life seems to take us out. But the truth is that we're never taken out, because we have always eternally been this being. We always are this being. And we're coming to the recognition where the idea of any kind of experience or of being someone that is getting it or not getting it completely dissolves into just being the being, that it really grounds and roots. And in a way, the identity on any level with the personal is uprooted, unraveled, dissolved, and purified, refined into the being. And the way that this happens is by stirring everything that is sticky in the field so that it has the opportunity to surface and come forward. So when the great Vedanta speaks of rooting out the vasanas, and only by rooting out the vasanas can we really come to a true and whole realization. Really, this refinement is that. It's that. So the scriptures didn't necessarily point exactly to a how-to, but consciousness has evolved enormously since a lot of these shrutis were brought forward by the rishis, right? And even has consciousness evolved since some of the very profound saints and sages are sharing these teachings. And so we have to really open to the possibility that we can't be attached to anything that's of time, anything that is pointing us, that we can't be attached. And if we're trying to achieve something that we are conceptualizing that has been in a way frozen in time, we're only ever really wanting to glean the timeless essence of any teaching, any dharma that has been shared, because of course that timeless essence is the same. But the great glory in this evolution of consciousness is that we receive the timeless essence, and then we recognize that we are the timeless essence. And then in a way, you are in the light of consciousness that is sage, right? So then it's about being this timeless being now, and letting go of concepts and ideas and beliefs and teachings, and actually being the aliveness. In a way, you are the living Vade in this moment, in a moment of real clarity. You're the living Vade. You are the living truth, right? You are that Shruti in a way. You're the field. You're the aliveness. You're the reverberations of truth, of the being. And here, we don't need to adhere to, in a way, teachings that we can't help with the mind conceptualizing on some level. But the essence is always the same essence, right? The essence is sage. The essence is guru. The essence is God, the glory. So when we open to the timeless, We have to let go of all attempts to try to then root ourselves or position ourselves within a dharmic context that is of the world, like something that we have read about or heard about. We have to root ourselves only in the timelessness of the moment, right? So you are the timeless moment. You are the essence of being that every timeless sage has pointed to. You are one with that, right? And this is the great recognition, is that how we root out the vasanas is to refine all of our beliefs and concepts, all of our stories into the oneness, into God, into the grace. We are being moved to come to the recognition that there is only God, only one. So everything has to be that one. And wherever that is not seen, it is to just be still and watch, to rest in the being as the awareness and be aware, open to the feelings, open to the old stresses that are memory, that are past and holding patterns, open to release all of that which feels like past. Because really it's past more that causes the disturbance and distraction. We want to open to meet all of the past that comes dancing out of the subconscious, out of the unconscious, so that we do not have this burden of memory and past that the mind can just keep referencing, right? So future is a sticky little place as well, but future is more sticky because it's an idea of, I will be this then, if I had that, this is what I'm aspiring to, this is my intention. It's kind of has a sense of hope, right? Again, it's another escape for the mind to imagine something better, something, a time when I will be. And so it's sticky, of that we can be sure. It's sticky because it's escaping from the moment, but it's not as sticky as past. Past is a much bigger fish that we want to get caught and dissipate, right? Dissolve, because it's through past that we judge. It's through past that we have fear and anxiety. It's through past that we have opinions. It's through past that we have concepts and beliefs and ideas. It's through past that we are stuck in the idea of being a me. And it's then that me that starts dreaming its way out of being stuck in the past by imagining a future. But that's just as sticky. The only way out of that maze is to be here in this moment. Zoom out, come to the perspective of freedom, of just simply being, the simple presence of being that is aware of all of that, is already free. And as these words come, it is to confirm in your direct experience that in the presence of being, do you have a past being? Do you have a future being? Do you have anything other than this moment here now, still and silent and free? Is there anything else here, being, than the felt sense of yourself just being here? Right here now, in the timelessness, the unlimited, infinite, eternal grace of this moment, just as it is. That in this, we don't have to use any techniques to perfect the me. We just see quite simply, oh, I'm not the me. What I am is, what the I is not the me. Quite simply, what I is not the thoughts, is not the body, is not the limited, not the concepts, not the story, not the roles, not the name. What I is this presence. It's like that song, Is You Is, or Is You Ain't, right? What I is, what you are is this moment. This moment, plain and simple and utterly free. You are the being that is. You ain't the me. Of that you can be sure. And here, as the I that is, there is love. There is love, abundant love, unconditional love. You are the love. There is no shortage of love. We do not have to grasp on and be scarce with love that is true. There's no scarcity of love. There's an absolute abundance. It's never restricted. It's never lacking. And here in the glory, the light of being, this truth can be known right now, right? Where you don't have to work to be deserving. You don't have to work to be worthy. You don't have to work and work to improve yourself, to be someone that can finally be lovable. You can zoom out and be here in this moment and discover that you are that love that you have longed for. You are that embrace. You are the divine embrace that is holding you so tight, so tight, that has never left you, has never abandoned you or rejected you, has always been here, absolutely one with you underneath the story. It doesn't look like what the mind is looking for. It's not an experience. We are so conditioned to our story of lack, our story of something missing, our story that we are not enough. It is, in essence, the human condition, and it is our greatest protection in the human condition to continue to perpetuate and believe the story of not being enough. And of course, the one that feels to be not enough, the one that feels to be unlovable or have something wrong or missing, feels to be a victim to who knows what. But we are only a victim to ourselves. And we have to discover in this rooting out of the vasanas, as the scripture invites us, we have to discover that we are only a victim to our own ignorance. We are only a victim to our self, that we are not a victim to a power outside of us. We are a victim only to the great misunderstanding that is within us. So we have to root out the great misunderstanding. To root out the great misunderstanding is to surrender the victim, and take complete and utter responsibility for absolutely everything. Without understanding, we surrender the victim to complete and utter responsibility, that somehow everything that I see is my own creation. Every thought is what is keeping me away from the grace, the freedom, God that I am longing for. It is only thought. And it is when we can take complete responsibility that we can stop the cycle of victimization and realize that the perpetrator right? The perpetrator is our own ignorance. It's our own misunderstanding, that we cannot point that to an external power. We cannot blame or project that. We cannot blame or project that upon our parents. We cannot blame or project that upon God. We cannot blame or project that upon even whatever kind of challenges and trauma we may have lived through in the early life. We cannot project it. It's not about working that way. It's about recognizing that somewhere deep within us is a misunderstanding that we are separate from the whole. And if we take complete responsibility for everything, and we realize that the only thing that creates separation are the thoughts that we are separate, then we have this possibility to surrender victimization and to resume being the power. But in order to resume being the power, we will very likely have to surrender through all of the stories of the perpetrator that we want to point and project as being outside of us. So this is big, what we're speaking of here. It's no mean feat. It's not for the faint-hearted. Because the way that collective consciousness works is to keep cycling around the blame so that we stay in victim consciousness, so that we stay in separation. The only way out of separation is to take a depth of responsibility through being the being and recognizing that there is nothing, somehow there is nothing outside, and that only thoughts are creating that story. And of course, when we have a big story, trauma, stress, really deep stresses, it's very, very hard to really take responsibility. But, you know, love is so patient, and love is so compassionate, and love offers us the grace of support and holding and presence and love through companionship in order to guide us to be able to hold ourselves so that we can meet this depth of story and truly face this core misunderstanding, this core deep misunderstanding that someone else caused our pain. It's not about on the person level saying, I caused my own pain. It's more subtle and profound than that. It's about actually just not engaging in the story at all and being able to meet the stress, the layers of stress as they arise, and love all of the parts of ourselves that are courageously presenting themselves. And however much we want to see darkness in these parts of ourselves, because often as these parts start to courageously come forward, we will feel like, well, that part of me is not nice. That part of me is not good. It can really bring forward some feelings of anger, rage, fury, disgust, evil, all of these things, because we have created these stories deep within the psyche in ways that we don't even imagine, but we are using those to keep ourselves separate, right? We're using those and we're being a victim to our own deeply rooted unconscious places. And the only way is to face these unconscious places. Now, the grace is that in right timing, we don't have to go rooting around. We don't have to go. In fact, we definitely must not go trying to root around in psychological functioning, because it doesn't work like this. The grace is that life is bringing forward everything at the pace, in right timing and perfection, as we are able to meet it. It is really just about meeting your resistance, your triggers, your stories, all of it, as it brings itself forward, as it offers itself up out of the unconscious. It's to love every single part of you and not to reject, not to abandon any part of yourself, but to stay fully present and open, without judging, without the story, without projecting, right? It's this is the way that we root out the vasanas, right? It can seem like, wow, that's a lot of work. And on a certain level, it is. It requires a diligence and a resilience, a courage and a resolve. But it is this is the way that we take the abstract recognition of the being and actually truly bring that into the embodied light on the surface of life. It's what allows us to live unprotected, with the heart wide open, so that the divine can shine through that wide open heart, right? So that we can really live the freedom that we can taste in the field. We can really live that freedom through meeting everything that resists it. To know that every single part of life, however we see it, it's all thought, and that we take complete responsibility for all of our thoughts without projecting them outwards. So this is where we say, do not leave yourself. Let us meet in the heart, in the oneness, and do not leave. Be here in this heart, in this oneness, in this being, and know that if you feel like you have left, if you feel like you can't get back, then just call upon a being that can bring you back, right? If you feel like you have got a big chunky thought that's really acting as a blockade, then call upon a companion that can bring you back, so that you don't leave yourself and you don't get lost in projection and judgment and fear and stress, that you come to the grace of the being. You come and rest in the truth, the sanctuary of the knowing, where there can be clear seeing, that it's only thought that takes you away from this truth. And every time we come back to this remembering, we know this place where we can say, I'm never leaving. I couldn't possibly, it's so clear, right? But something comes in to challenge us, to test us in a way. Can we meet those tests without leaving, right? The deeper in we are, the greater the invitation to not leave, however great the test is. Does not even matter how things play out on the surface of life. It is all about staying with yourself, staying true. Nothing in the story matters. It's to stay in this truth, to stay in the simplicity of being, in the openness, in the wide open heart, and not to leave. It is quite a union, reunion, to make such a commitment to not leave yourself, to not abandon yourself, to not reject yourself, to not believe the story that you are unlovable, unworthy, not enough, right? That there's something missing, something lacking, and you need to reach into the worldly to get that. It's not the truth. You do not need to reach into things. It is to reach deeper into yourself. And in right timing, the readiness comes to reach deeper and deeper into yourself, to really not leave yourself, to reach deeper in. So what we are speaking of here is, because we are deepening, we are opening and refining. And so the invitation comes, the guidance and support comes to support the deepening, the how to root out the vasanas, how to stick with this graced refining, how to face the world as yourself, and to really allow the being to pervade all of your life, to really get into all the nooks and crannies. So we come to really know the oneness in absolutely everything. So we have spoken of the needs met structure and how this habit to try to get our needs met in the world keeps us away, in a way, from meeting our own needs, right? From really falling into the being. And that needs met structure is part of the mind's conspiracy to keep us in separation, that we are habituated in certain kind of protective egocentric patternings to keep playing the victim, to keep not getting our needs met, and to find a familiarity and safety in not getting the needs met. But the way out of this is to really open up and see where we try to get the needs met with things and experiences and relationships and people, with the worldly, and how we are constantly disappointed. And that is really inviting us not to come into a sense of despair that we will never ever get to a feeling of fullness that is born out of the sense that my needs will never ever be met, because they will never be met in the worldly until we meet our own needs and we surrender out of the pattern of victimization and meet the perpetrator through absolute responsibility, and recognize that the perpetrator is this misunderstanding. It is the darkness of ignorance, right? So where we feel like, well, I have this darkness, it's ignorance. It's the ignoring of the self. It's one of the kleshas. It's that we ignore the true self, that we're hooked into a deep-rooted cycle of separation, and to keep separating, that we're in this cycle to keep confirming, and then to play the victim, and to keep feeling like a victim to life, to situations, to people and relationships. But that's because we are giving the power, right? Through victimization, we're giving the power to something outside of ourselves, because we're projecting that perpetrator to something outside of us. So we're habituated to say, well, it's the fault of this, it's the fault of that, it's because of this. But when we really stop the cycle of victimization and we take responsibility and we invite just a complete openness to the moment, that we could say that all responsibility is with God, but that we're not projecting a blame to the divine, but that we're surrendering, that all responsibility, the only doer is God. And in a way, can you forgive God? The only one that needs forgiveness is yourself. It's to forgive God and to come to yourself, come to this depth of responsibility and a surrender to the oneness, where that projection is surrendered into meeting the feelings that are arising, meeting all that is coming forward, and meeting just the feelings, not the story, just the feelings, right? It's when we engage in the story that we get taken out. And this is where, if we engage in the story, where there's trauma, we can feel really, really stressed. And sometimes we do need support, right? When we touch into some really deep places, we can need support. So it's to really be open that the support that is needed is available through grace when we are open and honest and we allow true movement, because this work is very deep and very, very profound. But support is always here when we are open, willing, courageous, right? We can find that the right support is available. Often we can just meet the feelings and it doesn't feel comfortable, but we can meet the feelings and we, let's say, get comfortable with discomfort. We are able to meet the old stresses that are arising, and without the story perpetuating and nourishing the pain body on the surface, where the mind is really engaged in that cycle of victimization. The pain body is really that cycle where the mind is making more of a story and feeling worse and worse. What we're inviting is that we come underneath that to just meet the old stress with presence, with gentleness. And we really, in the presence, allow a spaciousness for those old feelings to surface and to be held in presence, held in love, while they unravel and release, and that it's okay for whatever kind of releasing is coming forward. And we recognize in this that the most important part is to remain as the being that is aware, to be the aware witness of it all. When there is stress being released, when there are triggers and resistances and stories coming forward, it's to remain as the witness. When you are witnessing, there is a spaciousness where, as the witness, you are not entangled in what is coming forward. Only when the mind is involved is there entanglement. So it is this meeting as the being, as the presence of love, that can allow what is surfacing to come forward. And this is where we invite, do not leave yourself. To not leave yourself is to stay as the awareness, as the being. We're not bypassing or escaping. We're being the openness of the moment as the being, the wide openness of the moment, so that whatever is arising can arise into openness, can release into openness, can come forward courageously into openness. And that openness is the presence of being, the presence of being that you are in truth, right? So as these words are coming, we're speaking of all of the ways that this work can unfold. We're speaking of the ways that it can start to come forward. And we're also speaking of the deeper ways that as we really mature, this can come forward. So just to receive what feels pertinent, right? Where there's a resonance, where it feels supportive, and to let the rest go. Don't let what is being spoken of create more stress. Don't let what is being spoken of create concepts or ideas, because there is such a profound grace to the way that this all unfolds. Truly, truly there is. It's so incredibly profound because it is intelligence. It is consciousness, consciously awake to itself, experiencing itself, and bringing forward what it is ready in divine timing to meet. It doesn't make it easy, right? Because we are opening through our protections to the love, to the wide openness of the heart. Irina Tweedy said something very beautiful about her journey like this, that it's like crossing a bridge made of hair with a fire blazing underneath, right? It takes courage. It takes courage. But when the fire is burning, you know that in truth you are the blazing fire, you are the eternal flame, and it gives you courage to cross a seeming bridge of hair because you know that you are the flames, you are the fire, and that fire that is calling you to God, to your true nature. There's nothing that you will not do. A bridge of hair, nothing will keep you from yourself, right? Nothing will keep you from yourself. And this is the miracle of this unfolding. This is the intelligence of this unfolding. What we can also say is that the number of times that the mind will say, I cannot do this. This time it's too much. I cannot, right? From your knees on the floor. I cannot. This time I won't make it, because the mind is very dramatic, and with great compassion, it will again and again speak that it cannot possibly. But somehow, from that puddle on the floor, on your knees, another morning comes, another sun rises, and the part that feels like I cannot do it has made it. Love has made it. You have crossed another bridge and burnt what needed to be burned. And yet here you are. And the deeper knowing of what you are is here. There's more openness. There's more clarity. And the recognition in the humbling is, oh, this is the way. Whatever it takes, bring it on, right? We courageously invite forward, because the knowing is the way is right through. And what we're speaking of is not about story and analyzing, evaluating. We're not speaking about engaging in story at all. We're not speaking about psychological functioning. We're speaking about just meeting life as it shows up, right? Now, some beings might say, well, nothing really that hard is showing up. Great glory, great glory. Be with the small mountains, right? Be with the subtle protections. Be with what is showing up, because what you can be sure of is that there are protections. If you have judgment, opinion, resistance, triggers, let those be the bridges of hair that you are crossing, right? If it feels like there are bigger pieces coming in, and we have all spectrum of work going on in the grace of our Sangha. Let's say it's all relative, because it is. This is the relative, the worldly, right? It doesn't really matter whether your struggle feels big or small. If you're not feeling the grace of utter freedom in every moment, then that's still separation. That's still a sense, an imagined sense of somehow being bound or contracted, protected. And that is not the truth of who you are. That is not the truth of what we are. What we are is freedom, happiness, joy. And so first we come to this openness of being, the felt sense of presence. But we can, through various means through the life, keep touching into this presence and tasting this freedom. And then we wonder, why does it not stay? It doesn't stay because we get tangled up in life and the story. The freedom is always here. What you are tasting as yourself, you never leave yourself in truth, but the attention goes to the story. And this is why we feel like we're not really living this great freedom that we taste, right? So we can move through profound tastes, we can go to retreats and follow teachings, and in certain situations, we can fall in. But the way that we live this, the way that we come to the knowing of the abiding realization of true nature, of being the light, of being the living divine wholeness, is to face everything that we habitually get distracted and entangled in. We face it as the being, as the awareness of it. And we don't continue to play out the story when challenges arise and reactions and triggers come. We receive the grace of whatever arises, and we use this as fuel to transmute our threads of discordant consciousness that can keep us in the sense of being bound into boundless blissful freedom, right? We transmute everything through the vehicle into the remembering of the essence nature. We transmute everything to know its essence nature. We bring a depth of forgiveness. What are we forgiving? We are forgiving ourselves. We're forgiving our ignorance. We're forgiving our blindness. We're forgiving the great misunderstanding. We're forgiving what we couldn't see until we see it, right? It brings this flow of unconditional love in the knowing of the being that we are. So it cancels out unlovableness, right? We open to the openness that receives everything, that is life in perpetual surrender. We face our fears, right? Fears are another way that grace brings forward. Right? We can say, oh, well, I'm just afraid of those things. Those are just my fears. But when we actually face those fears, again, this is a way of seeing through. What are we afraid of? What are our greatest fears, right? As soon as we touch upon something like that, we tend to just pull away from it. Whoa, keep that over there. But what if we face it? Our greatest fear is death. Our greatest fear is death. Again, it's another one of the kleshas, right? Another one of the veils that keep us bound. What if we're to face that? Actually face all that keeps us bound. Open to it as the openness. Recognize that whenever there's a trigger or a resistance, that we are somehow leaving ourselves, that we are somehow in the mind, and that it's seeing through the mental resistance, meeting it through the sensations, that we surrender resistance into the being, right? We're distilling everything into the being. So just to notice as these words come, it doesn't matter that we're speaking about all of this. The silence is deep and alive. The stillness is presenting itself, because we are speaking truth. Consciousness speaking to itself, the wide open heart speaking to itself, speaking what it wants to hear. Even when it feels challenging to hear, there's a nourishment in receiving what is longed to be heard. What is longed to be heard is a freedom of speaking the things that we tend not to speak about in our life of separation. But truth speaks, that which we tend to try to not speak about or avoid. And when it is spoken of, we feel open and nourished, relieved. Because our greatest longing is to be fully revealed. Our greatest longing is to be the living freedom. Our greatest longing is to know the love that we are. Our greatest longing is to let go of protection, victimization, and to be the wide open space of love, just simply being. The greatest longing is to be the self, to be one with God, to be living divine wholeness, living radiant wholeness. This is our greatest longing, whether we know it or not, or whatever words we might put to it. On some level, our greatest longing, our greatest desire is utter freedom. And that freedom is freedom from the mind that acts as the only device that keeps us from freedom. So it's freedom from mind by seeing through all of the ways that mind creates obscuration and recognizing that how we root out the vasanas so that this recognition, this remembering, this realization can really shine in the knowing of itself is through facing all of life and meeting all of life. That we, as consciousness, we have the evolutionary intelligence of consciousness to guide us more deeply because we're ready for this depth of guidance. Because what is being pointed to is an invitation to really fall in to the depths of this knowing, to really realize the self, to live this truth. That if it wasn't a possibility, then this wouldn't be happening. So it's all about where you feel the resonance, the aliveness of the presence enlivened. The stillness, the silence is absolute peace, unmoving, unchanging, the aware being. And yet in the being, simply being, there is an aliveness in the knowing, in the recognition. There's an aliveness in the presence. And that aliveness is the aliveness of the consciousness that is conscious knowing itself. Mm-hmm. So here in the being, we are one. There is only one, no second. And it is to feel the resonance of the oneness, the resonance of the being, the simplicity, the stillness, the silence, the being that is aware, and just to be here, just to be here. And with all that is being spoken, it's just to feel what is enlivened, what is noticed, and let everything else go. Don't hang on to any of the words. Don't hang on to any ideas. Just be with yourself in the presence of now, in the silence, in the stillness, in the knowing of true essence nature. Just to be here as the open heart that is wide, infinite, timeless, and free. To feel that the being has no story, the being has no past, the being has no future, the being just is this timeless now. And the knowing of the being is the alive flow of life. The silence, the simplicity and stillness of just being. Mm. Nothing needs to be understood. The alive flow of life is just flowing as your life. The alive flow of life is animating the form and creating the appearance of life. What we are coming to realize is that you are the alive flow of life. You are not the someone, you are not the me, you are not the body or the story. You are the alive flow of life. You are the true body of light. And in that, what we have thought of as the physical body is, in fact, a much more subtle vehicle of transformation, transmutation. And as we come to open to this flow of life and all that we are speaking of, the body is cultured and refined to be able to transmute and to perceive in more and more subtle ways. But it's not the physical layer of the body. It's not even really the subtle body. It's the body of awareness. It's the body of light that is the consciousness. It's consciousness subtly perceiving itself. And so in a way, the sense of the physicality of the body gives way to the subtlety, like a subtle body, finer feelings, which gives way to the finer feelings, which are the subtle perception of consciousness. So in a way where the body is transmuting, it's that the physicality in a way gets refined, even the subtle body gets refined, so that finer and finer frequencies can be received. And in order to transmute more, in order to be that, hold that reverberation, and in a way, it's not really hold the reverberation, it's to be an antenna reverberating at that frequency, to be just constantly transmitting the frequency that you are living at. Because transmitting the frequency you are living at is then in service to the whole, right? To the collective. You're living at a finer frequency. So even science has proved this to a certain degree, right? That joy and happiness has a finer frequency than anger or fear, right? But we're taking it to another level when we're speaking of the frequency of true joy, true happiness, like freedom. When we're opening to the finer frequency of the being, then this is the frequency of the wide open heart of divine wholeness. And as we open to the being, these kind of frequencies affect the whole collective in a huge ways that cannot be spoken of or imagined by the mind. And this is when we speak of this is our service, right? It's not somebody's service. It's the service. It's being that flow. It's being that flow of life, resonating at the frequency of divine glory, of light, of love, of unconditional flowing life. So this truth is already here. This truth is who you are. And it is to be here now in this truth, remembering, resonating, aware, alert, silent, peaceful, and in that awareness watching, but not getting hooked into being the flow of life, living itself, living in alignment with nature, we could say, living in alignment with life's natural harmonies and flows, that life knows how to balance itself. And the more that we come to align with nature and rest in the being, then we are being cultured and refined to live more and more in alignment with the naturalness of life living itself. So just to be here, recognize the felt sense of being, the freedom of being, that we are one here in the wide open heart, in the knowing of being. And this wide open heart is always a wide open heart. It never closes. The shop never closes, right? Always open, always here, always free. And it is just to feel the resonance of this depth of truth, of this depth of support, that in this unfolding, it is to come to this remembering and be free. Be yourself. To see that it's only mind patterning when believed that takes you away from this truth. And so to rest here and to be aware of that mind activity, but not to let that mind activity rob you. Just to be aware, watch, and allow life to live itself. The mind can sometimes say, well, how? You don't need to know how with the mind, because life is already living itself. In a way, the instruction that can be received is to be aware, just keep being the witness, right? To keep watching, witnessing, watching, and in particular, be watching when there's a trigger or a resistance that arises. When some kind of stress or challenge arises, watch. And instead of identifying and letting the mind story run, have the courage to meet the feelings and sensations and let there be an unraveling of the deeply held stress into the being. Be present with these lesser known parts of yourself and don't push them away when they are courageously coming forward. Be the being, be the presence that invites them into love. When we are speaking of wholeness, being whole, when everything is included, what the mind likes to say is, well, if everything's included, then all of the thoughts are included. And on a certain level, that's true. But when we really come to this wholeness, we see we're resting in a consciousness where the thoughts are seen to be phenomena and not real, not reality, right? So yes, everything is included, as in all of life, the whole appearance of life, but it's to watch the thoughts and see through the personalized ownership of thoughts, and see how thoughts create separation, see how thoughts create victimization. Just to really illuminate as the awareness that it's only thought that creates the separation. It actually creates the suffering because thoughts create resistance. Underneath the thoughts, there is sensation. So resistance or a trigger can be a charge in the nervous system. But if you don't think about it, and you just receive the energy and open to the energy, then you see that it moves very quickly through the nervous system. It frees itself through the nervous system. It's to really illuminate as the witness that when you think about it, it perpetuates the suffering. That when you think about it and believe the thoughts, you feel worse. When you don't believe it, you're free. It's to see this, watch it in action, so that you're confirming it in the being, you're confirming it in your direct experience, clear seeing. The more that we open to the being and the softness, the gentleness of the relaxed heart, the infinite heart, the more space there is for allowing these stresses to arise. Watch it. Be still. Breathe. Stay present. But do not be pulled into the thoughts, the me thoughts, the me thinking about it, the protection. See that it's protection, it's defense. It's all the subtle ways of the victim cycle coming back in. And then remember that that victim cycle, the only way out of the victim cycle is to take full responsibility, so that you're not hooked into a cycle of powerlessness where either you're depending upon another to empower you, but you're actually taking complete responsibility so that you meet this perpetrator inside you. You meet your own ignorance. You then have to, when you feel the feelings, you have to be humbled to face your own delusion. And only when we meet our own delusion can we truly see through the veils of separation. It brings us to the knowing that there is only one, and that one is God, is divine wholeness, and that we are one with that in the oneness. That whatever that is, whatever that divine wholeness is, what God is what we are. We are one with that. This is the truth that is here now. Where you feel the resonance, where there is a knowing, just to drink in the knowing, to be with yourself in the remembering, in the recognition, wherever the resonance is alive, to just fall in to the yes, yes, yes. If the outstretched hand of God is pointing to you, will you take it? Will you say yes? Will you say yes? Surrender the thoughts into being your divine self. The silence, the stillness, the simplicity of being. right here, this timeless moment, empty and free. This is who you are in truth. This is the essence nature that is whole and pure and free. Mm. Resting here. Resting here.